There comes a moment, often unannounced, often unwanted, when the noise of life fades. Friends stop calling, the house grows quieter, days feel longer, heavier. And the person staring back in the mirror feels more like a distant acquaintance than yourself. It's not dramatic, not cinematic, it's a slow burn, a soft fading. A kind of isolation that wraps around your life like fog, dense but almost invisible to others. Many people over 45 know this space intimately. After decades of raising families, investing in relationships, or building a career, the silence that follows can feel like exile. But what if this solitude isn't an accident? What if it's a message, not from fate, but from your own becoming? Friedrich Nietzsche, the radical 19th century thinker, argued that periods of isolation are not only necessary, they're sacred. In his eyes, anyone seeking to grow, to truly evolve, must first endure distance from the familiar. He didn't see isolation as punishment. He saw it as a crucible, a place where illusions are stripped away and what remains is raw, real, and ready. But in modern society, solitude often feels like failure, especially in the United States, where worth is so often tied to busyness, social proof, and productivity. So when life slows down, when friends drift or purpose blurs, we start asking, what did I do wrong? But Nietzsche would say, you're asking the wrong question. The real question is, what version of you is trying to emerge? This chapter of isolation, however painful, is not the end. It's the beginning of a reorientation, a stripping of false roles, a silent invitation to become someone you haven't yet dared to be, not who the world asked you to be, but who you might have become if you were finally free. And freedom, Nietzsche believed, always begins in solitude. There's a reason most people avoid solitude. It's uncomfortable. The silence doesn't just echo around you, and it echoes within you. When you're no longer distracted by obligations or constant connection, the mind begins to speak. Regrets rise. Old wounds resurface. You start to feel the full weight of choices made and paths not taken. It's no wonder we often reach for distractions, screens, work, even toxic relationships, just to avoid sitting with ourselves. But Nietzsche would challenge us to resist that urge, to stay, to sit with the discomfort. Because within that tension lies a powerful transformation. He believed the self is not a fixed identity, but something we forge. And forging, as with metal, involves heat. Pressure, destruction of what was, so something stronger can take shape. You may feel like life is falling apart. In truth, it might be falling into place, but not the place your old self expected. That's the great challenge of midlife. We start realizing that the map we've followed, often drawn by others, doesn't lead where we thought it would. And that realization, it's terrifying. It's liberating, and it's often lonely. For Nietzsche, this loneliness isn't evidence of failure. It's a sign that you're nearing your true path. He spoke of the Übermensch, the overman, not as a perfect being, but as someone who dares to overcome themselves, to question old values, to create new ones. But this process begins only when we stop outsourcing our identity and start facing what we truly are, beneath the noise. In American culture, where reinvention is idolized but rarely internalized, we often chase change on the outside. New jobs, new partners, new hobbies. But Nietzsche invites us inward. He says, let the old self die, let the ego dissolve. Stop pretending you have to keep playing the same roles. This kind of becoming isn't clean. It's messy, confusing, often painful. But it's yours, and the discomfort you feel is not a signal to turn back. It's proof that you've finally stopped lying to yourself. One of Nietzsche's most powerful yet least understood ideas is this: sometimes, to remain true to yourself, you must walk alone. Not because others have failed you, but because following them would mean betraying something deeper within. Many people, especially after 45, begin to feel the weight of compromises made over decades. The slow erosion of ideals, the swallowing of words to keep peace, the silent sacrifices in marriage, in family, in work, made for the sake of belonging. And while some of these compromises are necessary, others leave a quiet fracture inside, a split between who you are and who you show up as. Nietzsche saw this internal split as a kind of spiritual illness. When you live for the approval of others, when you numb your instincts just to fit in, you lose access to your most vital force, your authenticity. And often, the soul responds to that loss not with rage but with retreat. Isolation then becomes a boundary, a defense, a quiet rebellion against a life that no longer reflects who you are becoming. But here's the paradox. When you choose integrity over inclusion, solitude will come, and it will feel like loss, because it is. You might lose old friendships that were built on outdated versions of you. You might feel distant from a spouse who no longer speaks the same emotional language. You might leave a career that looked successful from the outside, but felt soul-deadening on the inside. These are not just decisions, they're griefs. But Nietzsche reminds us, no great transformation comes without a break from the herd. In a culture like the US, where connection is glorified but conformity often hides underneath it, choosing to be alone can feel like defiance. And it is, but it's also integrity in motion. A quiet vow to stop betraying yourself just to be accepted. If you're feeling isolated right now, it doesn't mean you've failed. It might mean, for the first time, you're finally telling the truth about who you are. And truth-telling always comes with a cost. But what you gain in return is something priceless, yourself. There's a moment in solitude, one most people try to avoid, when the past versions of yourself begin to fade. The roles you played, the stories you told, the identity you wore like a second skin. In the stillness, they begin to peel away, and what's left can feel terrifyingly unfamiliar. Nietzsche believed this moment was not only inevitable, it was essential. To evolve, you must first unbecome. The you that was shaped by childhood expectations, cultural norms, or years of survival strategies has to dissolve so something truer can emerge. But here's the hard truth. We grieve even the parts of ourselves we know we've outgrown. Think about it. Maybe you were always the caretaker, the one who held everyone else together, even as you quietly unraveled. Or the achiever, the one who gained recognition but secretly feared stillness. Or perhaps the peacemaker, the one who never expressed anger, even when it burned inside you. These identities may have been your armor, but armor over time becomes a cage. Nietzsche understood that real transformation requires a kind of death, not a physical one, but an existential shedding. The willingness to let go of who you thought you were, so you can become who you truly are, even if that person is still unclear. In American society, which often glorifies reinvention in external terms, a new look, a new job, a fresh start, we often forget the inner death that must come first. Real change isn't a makeover, it's a funeral. And isolation? It's the quiet chapel where this funeral takes place. This is why solitude feels so heavy. You're not just alone, you're mourning versions of yourself. But Nietzsche reminds us, this is not an ending. It's a preparation, because only by dying to the old can you create from the new. Only by stepping into the void can you find what's real. So if it feels like your life is crumbling, pause, look closer. It may be your false self that's breaking apart. And that's not destruction, that's the first sign of truth. When life strips away the roles, routines, and relationships we once anchored ourselves to, it doesn't just leave emptiness, it leaves a question. Why? Why go on? Why keep trying? Why endure silence, pain, or reinvention, especially when nothing guarantees the outcome? Nietzsche's answer was both challenging and liberating, because meaning is not given, it's created. He believed that we must become the artists of our own existence, that in the void left by disillusionment or loss, we are not cursed, we are invited to reframe suffering, to give it shape, to use it as material in the construction of a deeper, more personal meaning. This is no small task. Especially in the United States, where people are taught from a young age to seek purpose through external validation, career, family, financial success. But what happens when those pillars wobble? What happens when the kids leave, the career fades, the applause stops? Nietzsche would say that's when life truly begins. He called this creative force the will to power. Not domination over others, but mastery over oneself. It's the inner strength to stare into the abyss and not flinch, to take what was meant to break you and instead build something honest, something beautiful, something yours. But this process can only unfold in solitude. In the absence of distraction, we're forced to ask, what do I truly value? Not what my family told me to value, not what society rewarded, but me. What moves me? What matters, even if no one else claps? For many over 45, this question becomes more urgent. Time feels shorter. Superficiality wears thin. The desire for authenticity deepens. And while some panic at the void, others, those willing to walk with Nietzsche, realize this emptiness is a blank canvas. Isolation is not the end of your story. It's the clearing of space for a more meaningful chapter, one authored not by the world, but by you. And the meaning you create here? That is where your power lives. Nietzsche once wrote, "He who fights with monsters should look to it that he himself does not become a monster." And if you gaze long into an abyss, the abyss also gazes into you. It's one of his most haunting ideas, and one of his most misinterpreted. To face isolation is to stand at the edge of the abyss of meaninglessness, of emptiness, of no longer knowing who you are. And yes, it's frightening, but Nietzsche didn't warn us to avoid it. He warned us not to be consumed by it. Because when we stare into the silence for too long without anchoring ourselves, we can lose our footing. Depression creeps in. Bitterness takes root. Cynicism begins to speak louder than hope. And in those moments, the danger isn't just the pain, it's the distortion of pain. The way it convinces us that this is all there is, that we've been abandoned, that our suffering is meaningless. But Nietzsche, ever the existential alchemist, invites us to do something radical. Not run from the abyss, but learn from it. Let it shape us, not swallow us. This is what it means to become resilient in a Nietzschean sense. Not merely surviving suffering, but transforming it into strength. For those over 45 who may have endured decades of emotional labor, personal sacrifice, or silent heartbreak, the abyss isn't theoretical. It's personal. It looks like late-night loneliness, a marriage that lost its intimacy, a dream that never materialized, and staring into it can feel like surrendering. But here's the choice Nietzsche offers. You can fall into despair, or you can forge meaning from it. You can let the abyss define you, or you can define yourself in response to it. This doesn't mean romanticizing pain. It means refusing to let it be wasted. It means asking, what truth has this suffering revealed? What lie did it strip away? What part of me is stronger now, not despite the solitude, but because of it? In a society eager to numb discomfort, Nietzsche teaches us to confront it, not to be destroyed by the abyss, but to rise from it with clearer eyes, deeper roots, and unshakable self-respect. What comes after the abyss? After the silence, the grief, the unbecoming? For Nietzsche, it's not a return to the old. It's the birth of something unprecedented, a life created from within. But here's the catch. It comes with no roadmap, no applause, and no promises of success. Only the quiet, relentless demand for courage. Rebuilding after isolation is not like fixing a broken object. It's more like growing a new limb, awkward, slow, and deeply personal. You're not returning to who you were, you're building who you've never been. And in this process, Nietzsche offers a sobering truth. The strongest souls are not those who avoid suffering, but those who create in spite of it. In American culture, we're sold the fantasy of the comeback story. A clean narrative where everything falls apart and then triumphantly comes back together. But real life is messier. The person coming back is not the same. The relationships that once defined you may no longer fit. The dreams you rebuild might look quieter, more honest, more yours, and less impressive to others. This is where Nietzsche's philosophy becomes an anchor. He calls on us to reject comfort as the highest good, to resist the temptation to fall back into roles we've outgrown just for safety, and to instead pursue what he called becoming who you are. Not what others need you to be, not what the past trained you to be, but who you are when nothing is left but truth. That kind of becoming demands risk, emotional risk, existential risk. The risk of being misunderstood, of starting again at midlife or later, of creating a new identity in a culture that rarely makes space for reinvention past a certain age. But Nietzsche believed that risk is the price of authenticity. And those who have suffered, who have stood at the edge and not jumped, carry within them a sacred authority, the right to build differently, to live with fewer illusions, to lead with more clarity. And even if no one else sees it, you will. And that's what makes it real. In the end, solitude is not exile. It's not punishment. It's not failure. It is, in Nietzsche's most profound sense, a sacred space, a threshold, a place where the false self dies and the true self begins to speak. But this sacredness doesn't announce itself with fireworks. It arrives in subtle, often painful ways. The quiet moments when no one calls, the evenings where memories echo louder than present joys, the mornings when you wonder if anything ahead could feel as meaningful as what's already past. And yet these moments, as bleak as they may seem, are also the birthplace of clarity. Nietzsche believed that the greatest individuals in history did not emerge from popularity or ease. They emerged from aloneness, from the kind of solitude that strips away distraction and forces the soul to wrestle with itself, not to punish, but to purify, not to erase identity, but to deepen it. If you are in that place now, if life feels smaller, quieter, more uncertain, you are not behind. You are not broken. You are standing at the very altar where transformation begins. The culture around you may not validate this process. In the US, so much of value is measured in visibility, productivity, noise. But Nietzsche offers a different metric: depth, honesty, becoming. And that becoming almost always happens away from the crowd. In your solitude, you are reclaiming parts of yourself long buried beneath obligation. You are hearing your own voice, not the one shaped by expectations, but the one that whispers in the quiet, "This is who I am now." That voice, it's not weakness, it's wisdom. Isolation, then, is not something to escape, it is something to honor, to walk through with reverence. To use not as a space of despair, but of design. The life ahead may not look like the one you lost, and that's the point. It can be something freer, truer, less performative, and more peaceful. You're not alone because you're unworthy. You're alone because something worthy is being born, and it needs silence to arrive. We're taught to equate motion with progress. If we're not moving, not producing, not achieving, we feel we're falling behind. But Nietzsche reminds us, stillness is not weakness, it is strength gathering itself. There is a quiet kind of power that emerges when you stop running from discomfort, when you no longer chase distractions just to avoid the echo of your own thoughts. In stillness, you begin to observe, not react. You begin to choose, now not comply. And perhaps for the first time, your actions arise from authentic will, not inherited obligation. This is not passivity, it is preparedness, like a bow pulled back before release, like winter before spring. In solitude, in silence, you are not doing nothing. You are becoming someone who no longer needs noise to feel alive. The world may not see this transformation. It may misread your stillness as stagnation. Let it, because real growth often happens underground, in roots, before it ever blooms in public. Nietzsche knew the greatest strength isn't loud, it's centered. And sometimes your stillness is not a pause, it's a powerful beginning. At the heart of Nietzsche's thought lies a bold invitation. Become the creator of your own values. Not the follower of inherited morals, not the echo of cultural trends, but the originator of a life that reflects your deepest truths. For most people, especially in the second half of life, there comes a time when the borrowed rules begin to crack. What once felt sacred now feels rigid. What once gave structure now feels suffocating. And this disillusionment can feel like collapse. But Nietzsche would argue, it's actually liberation. This is your moment to choose, to look at the beliefs you were handed about success, goodness, love, aging, and ask, do these still serve me? Or am I simply surviving inside someone else's story? Creating your own values doesn't mean rejecting all tradition or becoming selfish. It means stepping into full responsibility. It means no longer blaming your past or waiting for permission. It means crafting a life where every yes and every no comes from alignment, not fear. This is hard work, it's solitary work, and it's not always applauded. But Nietzsche reminds us, greatness is not inherited, it is self-made. And those who dare to write their own code, even late in life, become not only free, they become whole.